Three, two, one, here we go. RAINMAN'S Take podcast. Observations on the world we live in. My take on current events and other topics of interest. Also, interviews with some really cool people. So let's get the conversation going.
Hey everybody, it's the Rain Man. Got a good old friend back for his second episode, and I'll introduce him to you in a second. But before I get going, if you are part of Rain Man's Take, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for participating. I really appreciate it. If you're new to the program, welcome. I know you're going to love the content. So if you could, go ahead and press that subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And also watch this video to the end. I really appreciate that. That helps me with the YouTube algorithm, which helps to get the word out further, which helps to continue the conversation. And today's conversation is going to be awesome. So by way of a quick introduction, Doug Lindemood is my guest today. Doug is a good old friend of mine from the Marine Corps days. He is a decorated Marine Corps Cobra pilot, war veteran. He's also the self-proclaimed craziest, most libertarian cowboy you'll ever meet in your whole life, as well as being a tree hugger. And that mix actually works. And I'll let him kind of describe it to you. But I wanted to introduce Doug. Again, I've had him on a couple of years ago, and we were kind of talking about his ranch. And I wanted to have him back on because it's been a few years and he had a lot of really cool things going on at the ranch. So I wanted to have him back on, just kind of give us an update. So without further ado, Doug, how you doing? And why don't you give us just a real quick background of you and Sunrise Ranch?
Okay, well, I'm doing really good. Background, oh man, what a crazy story. Somewhere along the lines in the Marine Corps, we were trying to figure out, what do you do with your future? And I had already gone to grad school. I'd written my master's thesis on the electromagnetic pulse in the industrial food supply and how weak it was. And then my wife got ill, and we kind of had to make a decision if we were going to do medications or actually try to see if maybe we could heal her through her diet. It's a digestive disease, and so we were crazy enough to believe that you could actually change the way you eat. It might actually affect your health, which we now. At that time, I mean, that's kind of common now. You can't jump on social media without getting attacked by either vegans or carnivores from one direction or the other who are convinced they've got answers. But at the time, I was a little fruity, And so we started with a couple milk cows. We were actually on a cattle ranch, and the guy had a lot of extra space, and we took on some milk cows. And we ended up with too much milk. We started feeding that to some pigs. We ended up with calves and ended up breeding some beef cattle. And the next thing you know, we were ranching and we ended up with a lot of extra product for somebody that just set out to, raise food for their family. It turned out to be quite a bit. And so we started selling that. And of course, that was in the San Diego area. And there's a bunch of fruity people down there that think you can heal yourself with food down there. So we ended up linking up with some people that are crazy as we are. And it just all kind of turned into some basically fledgling little business. I was still on active duty at the time, but just with a few years left. And we kind of hit another crossroads in our lives. Are you going to use your master's degree and, sort packages at Amazon and try to make somebody another billion, working in a high rise somewhere? Or are you going to do something you've probably wanted to do your whole life, for me, which was to just become a cattle rancher. And so I did that. And it was probably the hardest thing I ever did, because we were making all of about $1.25 an hour for many years. And then, over time, with persistence and consistency and a high quality product, and really just kind of a love for your customers. Because honestly, whatever stage they come to us in, whether they are a fully mature, foodaholic, they know everything about what you're trying to do and they agree with it, or they just literally stumble in for the first time and say, hey, why is your meat more expensive than Costco? No matter what stage they're at, we were there at one point too. So I can speak the language of the most mature, in-depth, person that understands all the intricacies of bone broth, or some guy that's like looking for a great steak for the weekend. So it turned out that, you just basically, you kind of get a love for your product and an interest in your customers. And we've never let up. I suppose I could go do things that make a whole lot more money. But I really love what I do. And So that's why I'm eventually, we expanded the ranches. We have a couple in California. I'm on the Western Wyoming ranch right now, and it's kind of our headquarters. It's where we take our guests. It's where our internships go. It's kind of where we do all of our lead experimentation stuff. Not our most producing ranch, but certainly our most explorative, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I spend all my time here. You can see the books on the shelf, and I do a lot of work here. Long days and outside on the ranch and in the office as well. So
I love it. So he is actually a real live cowboy, folks. And when I mentioned earlier in my introduction that he's also a tree hugger, what that basically means is you have a military guy who actually loves the environment, and he loves it so much that his ranch is one of the. It's just I'm not. Is that you or me? Somebody
yeah, that's somebody coming in the front gate.
Okay.
We're like a mile from where the front gate is. So that's our, we have successive zones, what is it? Defense in depth, right? That's our first warning. That's the LPOP sounding off that there's someone coming in.
Gotcha. So as I was getting back to it, Doug's ranch, Sunrise Ranch, is completely regenerative agriculture. And that's actually what makes this so unbelievable is you get a guy like Doug, Marine helicopter pilot, absolutely loves the environment, and it shows in the way that they actually ranch and the way they actually conduct business on the ranch. And that's what I think is so fascinating about it. And one of the things that, and he'll get into it obviously more, but his cattle are actually 100% grass-fed. And the bullshit that you buy in the grocery store that the FDA says is grass-fed, I'll let him get into this a little bit more as well, is not really. Doug is doing it the way cowboys and farmers did it 200 years ago. And that, I think, is amazing. And if you want to talk about healing the environment and being environmentally friendly, you go back to before the age of modern farming. And that's really how it's going to happen. And that's what I wanted to get into with Doug. On his website, which is Sunrise, SON-Rise Ranch.com. You go on that website, he'll give you all the information you need about the ranch, about farming on the ranch, about his grass-fed beef and how amazing that is for people. And then at some point, I'm going to let him give you the website where you can actually go online and purchase some of his beef. It's awesome. I wanted to have Doug on because his latest blog, he was talking about prairie grass and just how high it was currently on their ranch. And just even a couple of years ago when he and I talked, he was in the process of working all that. He was in the process of getting the earth back to producing like it did before. Before the Monsantos and the massive agricultural industry took over. And so if you could, Doug, kind of talk a little bit about that. Let's start specifically with that latest blog we were talking about. Your grass was 7 feet tall.
Yeah, well, it's actually, you can see it from my office, which is kind of cool. The first part we started with, and effectively what we did as ranchers in historical sense is we just mismatched the animal to the landscape. It was just a simple mismatch, and you can get away with that. Just like anything else in life, you can always live on a savings account or your parents' inheritance for a little bit. You can always exchange airspeed for altitude. Aviators know what that is, but that only works for a little bit, And so really what we had these massive carbon stores that were given to us as effectively. Well, they weren't given to us. One of my favorite jokes locally here is, hey, at least I had the decency to pay for my land. We took it. We took it from the Indians, and it came with a huge carbon store, and it was used by nature. And actually nature did a wonderful job of maturing the grasses and using them at a particular time and in a particular way. So they would get very, very mature. And then the buffalo herds would come in, and they'd be super densely packed. They would be almost shoulder to shoulder. And they would have a certain behavior where they're constantly getting pushed out to the edge of the circle. And that was because the predator packs were surrounding them, right? So the pack animals were attacking and they were eating off the edges, and they were taking the weak and that whole natural selection process. And then we came in, we wiped out that entire, and it could have been, it didn't necessarily have to be predator packs. It could have been Indians, right? It could have been hunters, right? But eventually we wiped out the buffalo, and then the grasses didn't have any counterbalance. So think of it like a teeter-totter with the grass on one side and the buffalo or the herbivore, the ruminant on the other side. And so what you'd have is the grass would grow, it'd get really big, real deep root system, and then it'd get eaten back, and then the pressure would be taken off because the herd would move on, right? The buffalo herd would move on. And now the grass could express itself and recover. We changed that system. We, as ranchers, changed that system when we just brought in cattle, fenced it off, and used it continuously. So now the grass is trying to grow, right? But every time it gets an inch or two, it gets bitten, right?
Right.
And in fact, what we did imperceptibly, slowly over time is the cows would go in, and because they had continual 24/7 access with no predator pressure to move them around, they would just go and eat their favorite grass. They would eat the ice cream, mint chocolate chip flavor ice cream grass, and they would leave spumoni, right? Or cottage cheese, or your vegetables, right? Or whatever vegetable you don't want. And they would leave that. And so the one that got left would get old, lignify, and die. And the one that was constantly being eaten would never get a chance to go to seed, right? It never got a chance to mature. And eventually it would eliminate. But which one went to seed and died? Which one reproduced? The one you didn't want, the one the cow didn't want. And so over time, if you were to look, this is what ranchers have the hardest time with. They can focus on what happens next year for the calf sale or 5 years from now, but they can't think 100 years out. It's just too complex for them.
Right.
And and what they did is they took all their pastures with continuous cattle movement on them and pressure, and they eliminated all the good grasses. And so what we did when we took over, and we've done this on a number of ranches, but this ranch in particular responded very well. We pulled the pressure off. We pulled the cows out. For a while, we were ranchers without cattle. It was hilarious, man. People just, they got the hat, but no cattle. They didn't really understand. It's okay. So what would happen is, then what happened is we just let the land rest. And when it rested, now you can over rest land. That's what California is all about, right? The cattle free by 93 movement in California took cattle off of all public lands, and all you have now is brush, and that will burn. That's why California burns all the time. It used to be a grassland, and with cattle, it could be again, but you'd have to have management and brains, and that's not very prevalent there.
California.
But here, what we did is we would take a small section, no cattle at all, and we'd go like a year and a half, 2 years. And all of a sudden, what would come back is these massive, old from antiquity, grassland plants. The bunch grass would come back. And now bunch grass in Wyoming has always been present, but you never see it over about a foot tall. And the reason for that is the cows come in the next year and they eat it.
Right.
But never, and we know for a rule, and it's very easy to, extension services have known this for years, that the subsurface depth of any plant, as a general rule of thumb, is 2 times its above grade length. So if I have a plant that's 1 inch tall, I have 2 inches of root. If I have a plant that's 1 foot tall, I have 2 feet of root system. And of course, what that's doing is mining deeper minerals that are coming up, being expressed into the plant. And where does it go? Well, it goes into the cow, right? So now my cow is actually more nutritious, and I eat the cow. So what am I? Well, I'm more nutritious. So the deeper root systems are much better for a number of reasons. The other reason is it keeps the soil loose. And so when the raindrops hit, that water can actually percolate in. And so you can hold, we estimate 23,000 gallons per acre subsurface water more than conventional grazing. So you're kind of sitting on a sponge, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that does is when we have lots of above surface plant structure, obviously we get more sunlight and photosynthesis, but we break the rain. So when we have driving rain, and we're on the east side of the Rockies, man, there are times when I'm out here in driving rain, I'm like, driving rain is not fun. It's the stuff that stings your face. Well, when that hits, man, it's hitting it like 100 miles an hour. It hits the ground. If it hits bare soil, it just blows it apart, right? It just spreads it and just beats it, and then it dries and puts a cap on it. We've all come up to something that's just rained and put our finger in and like broke the cap before. Yeah. Well, when you have plant structure, it helps soften that blow, and then it kind of hits the side of the plant. The plant can take a beating, and then it kind of leaks down and drips maybe that far instead of 200 feet. Yeah. So the velocity of the raindrop is actually much lower. And so you can imagine our excitement. Okay, so you can imagine our we were, when we arrived on the ranch and we saw plants that were maybe 2 feet tall on a good day. We're like, well, that's not normal, because we know that the early settlers would write letters back east or back to England that said, hey, we've arrived in the West, and the grass is so thick and it's so tall here that you can tie it in a knot while you're sitting on your horse saddle. Okay, well, that's like 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
So we know that's not normal. So we were curious, what happens in the prairie West if you just let the land rest and then move cattle in an intensive grazing operation. And so, very excitedly last year, we did this. We did it for a 2-year period, and we just went down into what we call the bowl, which is an area next to the creek that we did this experiment on. And we now have like 7-foot grass there.
And it took 1 year to do that.
Grass that's about a year and a half. Yeah. And then we moved the cows in to kind of see, do they destroy that? Well, if they go in for 24 hours, the most they can do is graze the tops and trample. And then what they'll do is on any bare soil, remember we talked about that capping that occurs once the water hits and it dries, it creates kind of a hard cap.
Right.
Well, that prevents water from infiltrating into the soil. And so what the cows would do is they'd come in and they would, when they turned with their hoofs to, here's a better plant, they would turn. They would till that up. They'd basically break it. It was a very light tillage. And that allows water to infiltrate. It disturbs the seed bed, which growth and disturbance go together. Light, managed disturbance. And then, of course, because they're only in for 24 hours, they can't really ever step in the same place twice. And if you look at continual grazing, you'll see that cows will cut paths. They'll just always walk the same way. They're creatures of habit. When we had milk cows and we'd line them up in the morning for milking, they would always get in numbered order. Like, I'm like, how do you guys know that? Well, they didn't know their numbers. They just knew that they're behind that cow, and that's how they get milked in the morning. And they would throw fits if you tried to put them in the wrong order. My daughter went out one morning, tried to get all the cows, and they were all out of order. I said, sweetie, they have to be in order. Well, they're going nuts because she can't, she didn't know the order. I said, okay, it's Elsie followed by Lacey followed by, and she, okay. And she, once that happened, they would all just stand there. They were just really good cows and follow in order. So, of course, when they're out on a range, and they want to go down to the creek and get water, they're going to walk the exact same direction, exact same steps, everything. Well, that's a 1,500-pound animal putting its foot in the same place day after day. They're going to drink once a day, at least maybe twice, right? Maybe 3 times. Depends on how hot it is. So then when the water hits, remember it's moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, hits the dry spot of land. It's already capped. So now it beads on the top of that. And then it starts to find its lowest point, right? So it can race down to the creek. And where do you think the lowest point is? Well, right where the cows walk. And so now we begin to erode, right? And all the topsoil is now going into the creek. And so to stop all that, you just simply look at what nature did. What did nature do with the ruminants? Well, it kept them in one place for 24 to 48 hours and then moved them on quickly using predator. Okay, I'm the predator. You're going to go wherever I tell you to go, whether I use a horse to move you or whatever. We use electric wire, single strand electric wire that's really lightweight. You can carry it on the back of a horse or a 4-wheeler, and you can put the cows in. And all of our cows are trained to that. We have cows that are trained to bells, so you can ring a bell, and they'll all come and line up in order and go to the next spot. And then so we manage our cattle across the land. And all we're doing is just tipping the scales in favor of the grass a little bit.
What? So in that 24-hour period, in that field that's got the 7 feet tall grass, how much do they eat? I mean, is it down to like 3 feet, or is it down further?
Oh gosh, no. They'll trample it. They'll poop on 50% of it. We look for a patty about every meter. So we're in about a 6 square foot area. We're looking for 1 patty per meter. They'll pee all over everything. They'll lay down and crush half of it. So all of that is very natural and very normal, right? Right. And it also depends on the time of the year and did it rain, right? If it's raining when they're out there, it looks like an NFL football team just had a practice on a real grass field. If it's middle of summertime, sometimes you just kind of can't tell. You're like, oh, it's all crushed and down, but it's clear that the grass needs to rest and they need to move on. Yeah. And because we're doing that across thousands of acres, we can give the cows they're constantly getting fresh nutrition. Our cows are so fat, it's ridiculous. I mean, they're just almost obese, right? Where there are times where we think, oh man, we gotta cut back on their feed, and so we'll give them a little bit less space, right? So they'll go, well, there's just not that much room here, and I already pooped over there, so I'm not going to eat, and Sally peed over there, so I'm not going to eat, and then it cuts down on their diet a little bit. So we're managing that for them, and we're acting as a predator in that case. Naturally speaking, if it were 250 years ago or whatever, and there's no humans around, if Sally got too fat and she couldn't, birth her calf, she'd die, and the wolves would eat her.
Yeah.
Right. So, but that's my job now. Right. And that's another thing that ranchers do is we try to get every cow through. And I don't do that. I go, hey, man, if you survive and you make it through the program, good on you. And if not, I didn't want you around anyways.
I love it. I love it.
Right.
You mentioned you got to adjust their feed. Now, all your cows, all they eat is this grass. And that's what makes Sunrise Ranch's beef so unbelievable, is that there are zero chemicals in the way they grow their grasses. They don't give their cows
any supplemental feeds,
any supplemental. So everything. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's why your ranch is so special. Is not only are you actually saving the planet, and yes, cow farts don't impact the planet negatively.
Yeah,
you are a living example of how you're supposed to ranch. And then the beef that you do provide is unbelievably nutrient rich. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's just the beef kind of speaks for itself. To sell beef, we don't actually advertise. We just hand out a sample. Usually that's enough to get people hooked. They're stuck on that. As far as the the way you're supposed to ranch, we think that's the way you're supposed to ranch. There's other methods. A lot of people will just, take their cows in the winter and supplemental feed them, and they just put them in a barn or they put them in a corral so they're easy to get to with the tractor. We don't do that. When we bale a field, we'll put the bales out into an area where we want to graze the cows in the winter, and then we'll unwrap the bales and we'll just put the cows, if it's covered in snow in the wintertime, we'll just leave a bale out there. And we'll just unwrap it. You take the strings off of it, and we'll let the cows in, and they'll tell us when they're done with it. We'll go out and look and go, okay, well, they're about, it's just about gone. And then they'll move on to the next one. And the advantage there is that in the wintertime, what that does is it allows us to concentrate their grazing in areas that are, say, trouble spots. Let's say we have a Russian knapweed infestation, or there's too much willow in a particular area because we haven't brought in the beavers to manage the willow. Maybe we're in that interim period and we need a lot of cow pressure, and cows are really heavy and can be extremely destructive if left too long. So what we'll do is use that as a tool. Imagine, going in with a tractor and clearing something. Well, we don't do that. We go in with our cows and we clear something. So we use the cow to our advantage. It's really just a tool. And if you just get out of the position of thinking that you've got everything solved, and you just realize, wait a second, I'm more of like an orchestra conductor here. These guys are all playing the instruments. If I can just put this together so it sounds good, I'll get a really great product and I'll save a ton of money. I'll be a really efficient running ranch. My cows will be a lot happier and healthier. My humans will be healthier, right? Because they're like, oh man, this tastes really good, exactly like you just said.
Yeah, and I believe you mentioned that. What was it? It basically was, you get the same amount of nutrients in a smaller piece of meat than you would in the stuff that you buy in the supermarket, just because.
Yeah,
of
that's called nutrient. It's just a saying we made up, which is called nutrient density. We just noticed that people that eat our beef eat a lot less of it. So if they were eating 5 pounds of conventional beef, they might only eat 3 pounds of our beef for whatever reason. And we have a crazy theory that maybe that's just more dense. Maybe it's just more nutritionally dense. We're pretty bad at letting our bodies tell us what to do. It's not necessarily our fault, I think. I think it's because we've monetized every single taste bud in our body. And, whether it's MSG or whatever, whether it's artificial flavor, one of the, I guess drawbacks of capitalism is that somebody decided for their capitalist experiment, they were going to produce food. And then when they got really smart, they were like, well, let's just let's just mess with their taste buds, which almost nobody knows anything about, so that when they drive through the McDonald's, they eat and they're satisfied for like just a few minutes, and then they'll come back to the McDonald's, and then we can just keep making money from that. That's would be a really great thing to do, right? Some other guy at the board was like, yeah, that's great. Let's do that. We'll call that a franchise. I don't know. Whereas for us, our job is like, well, no, let's get them the most density that they can get per dollar, right? Per penny. What's the most we can get them? Well, that's going to be beef. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You just can't get the calorie density However, in the beef industry, what they've done is they've said, well, let's add more fat or let's add some water or some fillers in there, right? And let's make that hamburger patty really big, but only a little bit of beef
Right.
and a bunch of other stuff. I don't know what the stuff is, but you could, pink slime or whatever the latest formula is. And it'll look like a burger, taste like a burger, and we'll charge the same price as a regular burger, but we'll make it so that they're hungry enough that they come back for more and we can keep making money on it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. It's and you're adamant on this in your blog and on the information on your website. No preservatives. Everything is natural, the way it used to be, the way it should be. The strong grass are bringing up the nutrients out of the earth that cows need, that humans need. It's an awesome thing. And you don't talk about politics at all in terms of being either a tree hugger or a climate control freak or an evil capitalist. You're like, hey, I'm just out here making a living, doing it the right way, and the product speaks for itself, and you're regenerating the earth the way it was before man.
Well, and listen, I mean, you could if pure capitalism in its just purest sense actually works quite well because everybody's motivated to do essentially quote unquote the right thing. I mean, I don't want to sound altruistic. I mean, we got into regenerative agriculture because it makes great financial sense. I mean, if I can get the grass to regrow for free, that's a lot better than buying bales of hay from somebody, don't you think? I mean, that's just going to increase my bottom line. If I can get customers who are like, oh my gosh, this tastes incredible, that's a lot better than a customer who calls and goes, this stuff sucks, but I'll buy another package because I got no other choice. So I mean, I don't want it to sound like we're some sort of altruistic, we just looked at it and we're like, oh man, it'd be really great if we didn't have a creek that was constantly eroding and moving 3 times faster than it's supposed to, or it did historically, and that there were trees down there to provide shade for the cows, and the cows weren't walking to the edge of the creek always and like breaking it down. Let's pump the water out into a trough and then rope off the creek so they can't go there. And then we'll get edge growth, and then we'll have beavers who will build dams so they'll slow the creek even more. And so, all that stuff is, you can have programs to make that happen. You can take a conventional rancher and twist his arm and make him do it. You can hold a gun to his head, or you can give him grants and incentives to try to entice him to do that. Or you can just actually sit down, figure it out, and go, wait a second, that's actually good for my bottom line. And I'm a capitalist. I like to make money. Maybe I should do that. And you just do it naturally. Yeah. So, I don't know that we're going to save the world. I just know that we're just like, well, man, that's actually how you make money ranching. You don't do it the other way because it just won't work. I mean, I can talk to thousands of ranchers a day that will tell you, just a ton of them. They have their own day jobs because ranching doesn't pay.
Yeah. And how big is your ranch again out there in Wyoming?
We have just under 1,000 acres out here. That's deeded property.
Okay. Yeah. And can you scale this up? So could a ranch that's 20,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have plans to take this into the sub 100,000 somewhere.
Nice. And so what about your neighbors out there?
We're a super, super small ranch. Our neighbors are 56,000. There's another one that's 442,000. And that's in Wyoming. And in California, we had 5,000 acres. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're the biggest ranch around. And we were. I mean, that was the biggest ranch you could find. It's just under 5,000 acres. And so, there's some other really big ones, but land is, so we've got a bunch of, if you want to talk about problems, we have so many problems on the horizon. It's not even funny. And one of the greatest is that we have an absolute piss poor monetary policy in the United States. And we have for many, many years. Yeah. And we're destroying our production base. I mean, as fast as you can speak right now. And part of that is that we have somehow or another gotten land tied to, because there's an excess amount of capital. Yeah. And people that are wise are trying to put their capital somewhere. It makes perfect sense, right? They're now putting all their capital into land. And of course, it's inflating the land prices. And the disconnect, it used to be when you bought land, some guy with a cowboy hat would buy land and he would just do simple math to figure out, that's how many cows does it hold? Oh, it pays for the land. Now you buy land and they go, how long do I want to keep my money away from some massive inflating system that's going to just totally destroy it and eat it, and my kids will never get a penny? So what's happening is, there's ranches out here that there's a ranch next to us that was founded in the 1800s. It's been in one family their whole time, and they carry enough to make it. They carry enough cattle to make it worth, I don't know, $5-6 million. It's on the market for $56 million. And you go to, well, how's that ever going to work? Well, that's a rancher's not buying that to run cows. He's buying that because he needs to, or some super massive wealthy investors finding a place to stuff money where it doesn't get eaten every day.
Yeah. I mean, Bill Gates is one of the largest farm owners in America right now, farmland.
Well, yeah, if you had billions, you would be too. Because there's no safe place to put capital right now, because our government has a monetary policy that eats it and destroys it. And, you know, we were just talking about this the other day. If they go to price fixing, I think you're aware that there's at least some sort of proposal somewhere on the political spectrum that says, hey, we should fix the price of beef. Holy mackerel. That literally is going to, it's just, you're dealing with dynamite, man. Yeah.
It's mind blowing. So, okay, real quick. That's a good segue. So you don't sell your beef in grocery stores. It's direct to consumer.
No. And we're somewhat sort of weirdo conspiracy freaks as well as all the libertarian weird stuff. I mean, we just really like when we drive trucks, they don't have logos on the side of them. I mean, I pulled in the other day in a gigantic Freightliner reefer truck, not quite a semi, a big box truck with a reefer unit running on it. Jump out. There's a line of people at the back of the reefer truck. I lower the lift gate down and I start handing boxes to people, and they're buying all kinds of stuff. And about after the mad rush, you know, everyone's paying cash and okay, great, after the mad rush, a guy comes up to the lift gate, and I'm pouring in sweat because I'd just gotten a whole bunch of boxes out of this big old freezer reefer truck and handed them to people. Some people had appointments, other people are just club members and they show up to see what the special is. They're just, and this guy walks up and he goes, "What the hell are you?" And I go, "I'm just some idiot cowboy from Wyoming selling my meat." And he goes, "Oh my gosh, I got to get in on this." And I go, "Well, you just take a sample." And he goes, "Oh, this looks like the best stuff I've ever seen in my life." I go, "Well, trust me, it is. That's why there were 30 cars here." And they're all gone now. It was a half hour in some obscure parking lot listed on our website. And he goes, "Do you have a business card?" And I said, "Nope." He goes, "Well, you don't carry any business cards?" I'm like, "No, if you want us, you'll find us." And he'll go, "Oh." He goes, "You have a website?" And I go, "Yeah, it's Sun-Right." I explained it out to him. He goes, "That's the most difficult website I've ever heard of." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, you got to have a sign on the side of the truck. There's not a number. There's not a phone. There's no identification on the side of the truck." He goes, "Man," he goes, "you're like the worst businessman in the world." I go, "Yeah, I got 6,000 customers in San Diego. Figure that one out." So what I'm getting at is, we've always done business that way. We've always done business in terms of, hey, I know this guy that knows a guy that's got the best beef ever, because that's really just been how we like to do things. But what we didn't realize is that if we go to this price fixing thing where the government comes out and says, and this is going to get really technical, and I don't know if you may want to cut this out later, but really, I mean, if you think about it, if Govy comes out and says, okay, beef can only be $4 a pound. Well, if my production cost is $4.15 a pound, guess what I start doing? I start building fences for a living, or trucking plywood. I don't make cows, right? I don't make beef because I'd lose 15 cents. I can't charge any more than that. That's the first thing that I'll do. So if you want to break a supply chain,
small business owners go away.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to, they'll go away or they'll find something else to do. But if you want shortages, you fix the price. That's how you do it. Because we know that if supply drops, demand goes up, right? They're opposite. They're inversely proportional. Now you might take a chunk out of the big boys that can actually make it for $3.15, right? And maybe they weren't making $4 a pound, but they're going to make a whole lot less, right? They're going to make a whole lot less. And you're going to take out all the fringe producers. Well, you're not going to take us out because we're not going to play that game. We're just going to meet our people on the street again. Because what's going to happen is people are going to go, man, I can't get beef. I mean, there's nobody's producing it. I can't get it. I go, well, I got it. Are you interested? Yeah,
that's
sure.
Awesome. That is awesome. All right. So with if people who are uncomfortable doing the drug deal on the side of the road, with the big semi
some dude. Yeah, I'm buying meat from a guy out of the back of a reefer truck. That's a little strange, and he's got a cowboy hat, so I know I can't trust him.
What's a website where people can go to buy this unbelievable beef?
Yeah, so you can go to son-riseranch.com, and that's just going to give you the information. That's the who, what, when, where, why. We write the blog there. We don't try to sell anything there. That'll link to other stores. There's a wholesale store called localbeef.com. That's like whole half and quarter cows and half pigs. That's like bulk packaging. So we have a ton of customers who just buy a cow every year or a half a cow every year. That's just what they do. We also have people that don't, maybe they live in a high-rise apartment in downtown LA and they don't have room for, a big freezer. And they'll get like a monthly box and they become members of the ranch. And you can, once you subscribe to a monthly box or a bi-monthly box, you get a free membership for as long as you're subscribed. And the membership gets you like early bird special. Like when I go to San Diego and I've got, 200 cases of ground beef and it's just, it's super cheap, right? It's the members that find out first. So they're the ones that are like, oh, he's coming to San Diego and, oh, he's got a bunch of ground beef and we need ground beef or whatever. Yeah. We're on the carnivore diet. So we need a bunch of box of extra steaks or what have you. So those are the people that can purchase from us that way. You can also just buy a membership without getting a monthly box. It's like $120 for $10 a month. That's $120 a year. And then you get the member price. Like when we sold ground beef a month ago in San Diego, we had 30-pound boxes and they were $349 non-member, but $279 member. So, they were saving like $70 by just being a member. So that paid for their membership almost right there. Some of them bought a couple boxes. So, and those people will like literally just find out, they'll go to our website and find out where we are. Like, oh, he's in the Costco parking lot at 10 o'clock on Tuesday.
Is it really like that?
That's literally. And that's it's so like why we pull, truck. Like when I pull in and I'm like, I pulled into one place the other day and I was like, oh, darn it. I chose a time when they're having some sort of event here. And then I got out of my truck and realized I was the event. Like, oh, wait, all these people are here for me. And I was like, crap, I better start moving fast, man. So,
it's like the farmer's market.
What's that?
It's like the farmer's market or
oh, sorry.
Like the food truck.
I lost you there for a second. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's like the farmer's market or the food truck scene.
Yeah, it is. It is a lot of that. And we used to do farmer's market, but that was like one package when we were first getting started. We'd be like, oh, here's a steak, and people would buy a steak. Now we almost do bulk all the time. I mean, it's pretty hard to find anything we've got that's under like $250 just because, it's a lot of effort to get it to you, so, and we have a big enough following for people that are I keep mentioning carnivore that are on, say, for example, the carnivore diet, that they just need gobs and gobs of meat. That's all they're eating. So they need a lot more than they're used to.
Unbelievable. All right. So you, in one of your blogs, you also talk about, actually, I think it's just on the website, but you're up in the mountains outside of LA around your ranch, and you were talking about the fire that had just ripped through there.
Oh, yeah.
And then you come back, several months later, and it's starting to regenerate itself. So explain that one, because first of all, what fire was that last year? The fires up there.
Oh gosh, that was quite a few years ago. I'm trying to remember. Okay. Yeah, I don't remember when I wrote about that, but yeah, a fire will actually do. It'll mimic a lot of the same thing if you think about it. It's a lot of the same stuff that a cow herd would do. It depends on how fast and intense.
It's a natural process, part of a natural cycle.
It is. Yeah. And that's part of, so what happens is, a fire will burn through and then the grass, say burn all the brush off, right? And then the grass will come back. And for a little bit, if you put cows back on there and manage that correctly, you could actually keep a grassland. You could actually flourish a grassland. Unfortunately, what California does is they go, well, we don't want any animals because they fart, or whatever their latest theory is. And so then it all the grass will die because it over lignifies its seeds and all that sort of thing. And then what comes back in is, because there's no animal pressure, is the brush. So brush is actually the chaparral or, the sagebrush or whatever will come in, and then that dominates. So once a brush comes in, once a tap-rooted woody stemmed plant comes in, it surpasses. It's kind of like King Kong, and it surpasses everything else. The grass really can't grow there. So there's two ways to destroy a grassland. The first is with continual full pressure grazing unmanaged. The second is the exact opposite. No cattle at all, no animals whatsoever. And what's interesting is in America, we do one of two things. We either put cows on grasslands continuously with no management, or we take them off and there's no animals at all and we destroy the grassland that way. Either one of those will destroy your grassland equally. You can have 100% guaranteed success with either of those methods if your goal is to destroy grassland and create erosion. But sorry to tell you, it's bad news for America, right? Because when we drive across vast landscapes of California and you look and you're driving along and you go, man, are there cows out there? And there's like one little black dot and another black dot, and they're all completely spread out. They are behaving in a way that is genetically and behaviorally completely unnatural for them. They would never find any protection in that. Yeah. Man, one cow alone? Are you kidding me? The wolf pack is going to eat you in 2 seconds. Right. No. In ancient times, the cows were shoulder to shoulder for protection. They were always, darn it. I got pushed to the outside. The weak ones would get pushed to the outside. Pack of wolves would take them down, eat for a few days, push the herd out of the area. Yeah. And man, all that activity on the grassland. So we are doing exactly opposite of what nature wants us to do. It's not hard to figure it out. I mean, these stories are told. We know historical records. Plenty of letters were written for how the buffalo herds would come through, and people would say you could be on, in a wagon or on horseback, and you'd cross an area where they knew the buffalo had crossed a stream and went up a mountainside, because you could see a massive, it looked like a Interstate 5, right? Interstate 80 just went, it's a mile wide. And so, they have written accounts of that. There are a number of people that wrote about that before those herds were destroyed.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And,
so you can mimic that. You can mimic that on a micro scale. You could do that on 50 acres if you wanted to. You wouldn't have to have 700,000 acres. You just reduce the herd size. Yeah. We generally say about 50 cows is kind of the smallest size you need to have good, what we call herd impact, which is the impact on the ground. Okay. And it is an impact. That's what you're looking for as a cattle rancher. You're looking for impact. You're like, okay, you guys have impacted this. Move on. You're not coming back here for another year and a half or another year, because I want my grass to grow.
Right. And I think the last time we talked, if I remember correctly, you were talking about, in 5 years, I want to double my head of cattle on the property or something like that. Where are you in terms of how big is the cattle?
Yeah, exactly. So we're almost, actually this next fall will almost be doubled. Yeah.
Nice.
So nice. Hopefully by November, we're going to bring on more cows, because again, your grasses will respond to this to the point where your place will turn into an overgrown, it'll look like a jungle. You just got more grass than you know what to do with. And so the answer for more grass is more cows. And so I would expect in a good number of years here, we're going to be competing with ranches that are 10 times our size in terms of production.
Awesome. That is awesome. Right. And as far as the environmental impact, there's no chemicals on the land. The land is regenerating itself naturally. Yeah. And that's producing it up through to the cow, to the human beings. So,
and most people don't understand that it's not just not applying a chemical to the land. So it's not just saying, oh, well, there's Russian knapweed. I don't want it on my ranch. I'm going to go get my Roundup and spray it. Right. That is a discipline, and you need to not do that. But it's also making sure that chemicals are not dispersed into the land through your cows, right? So let's say once a quarter we come in and we're going to pour on a chemical dewormer onto the back of our cows, right? And by the way, that's made every year. It's formulated every year, because the bugs that you're trying to deworm move way faster than the humans, right? Yeah. So every year they're going to sell you a new formula. It's kind of on a pump spray backpack. It's ivermectin, right? And it's going to kill all the bugs in the cows. And it'll kill the bugs in the cows for that probably month or 2 months or whatever. We don't do that. For example, we feed them diatomaceous earth. If you know what that is, that's ground up seashells, right? So we'll put it inside their mouth. We'll feed it to them in their body, and then we'll spray it. We'll powder it all over the backs of right down the center line of their back and down the side. They look like I joke around and say all the cows look like French horse today, because they're just powdered all in white. And of course we're covered in this stuff too, and you have to be careful. You can't breathe in a lot of that stuff, but that kills all the external parasites, because if you know what diatomaceous earth does, it cuts the membrane body of the anthropoid, right? It'll cut the ant or the worm or whatever, and then it basically dehydrates and dies. And we put it in their system, so it goes through their stomach system and it kills all the parasites off. Then they poop that out, and of course it's just natural seashells, so that's not gonna hurt my land. Right. And I don't have to beat the rush to hope I get the next, greatest $400 bottle of ivermectin that was developed to beat the new bugs that are for next year, because bugs are always going to develop. They're going to replicate so fast and be way ahead of humans. It's not even funny. Yeah. So we do this for our cows. They get a whole treatment that they come in once a quarter, and they get dewormed and cleaned up. And what's the advantage? Well, now they're not carrying parasites. So there's nothing competing for their energy. So now my cows are much more efficient, right? So when they go out and they graze this great grass, they're treated to the best grass in the county because we're managing it for them. They eat it and they go, man, this is really great. And they're getting all of that nutrition. There's not a tapeworm inside of them taking some of that nutrition and living off of it. Of course, I can't eat a tapeworm. I wouldn't want to. It's all going into meat, muscle, milk, hide, all that stuff that I need as a cattle rancher. So once again, you go that you just, one of my general rules is figure out what everyone else is doing and then do the opposite, right? Like all the guys wearing cowboy hats are headed that way. I'm going that way. Come on, folks, let's go. So they're all headed down to the store to buy the latest version of some chemical or some shot or something. I'm like, well, I'm not doing that. What does the shot do? Can I do it naturally on my ranch? And if so, I'll make more money. Because I didn't have to spend the $300 a bag of diatomaceous earth, like $10.
Yeah. And then, so what is it then? Is it more labor intensive?
So exactly. And that's a very good question. Most people won't think to ask that. They'll say, look, we understand algebra. If you take away A from one side of the equation, you have to add it to the other side, right? It is. It's all about you're spending more labor. Now, there are ways you can do it that will help you. But at the end of the day, you're going to be spending more labor. Frankly, conventional ranching is really quite easy. You just put the cows out on pasture and make sure the fences are good and they got water and salt. Okay. That's a lot different than having to go out every couple of days and move your cows and set up an electric fence and cross a creek that is, running full stream and you're throwing, it's work. It is a lot of, you can see, I don't know if you can see, but I spend some time outside. You know what I mean? And so you work for a living. You really, really do. And most of my days are start at, 4 or 5 in the morning and finish it gets dark about 10 up here. And that's, it's just pretty normal. But if it's a passion and you love it and you're getting paid for it, it's not bad.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. So talk to me again. You mentioned it earlier. You said something of 93, no cat. Is that when California? Oh,
cattle free by 93. Yeah, that was a campaign that took cows off of public land in California. Yeah. And what was really interesting is I think we talked about this last time. If you look at a hill, if you look at just kind of any hill in California, you'll see that they're starting to desertify on the top. Why would they desertify on the top of a hill? What is it, hotter up there? Yeah. No. Actually, the ruminant, the cow, water buffalo, whatever you want to call it, antelope, right? It seeks high ground. It always seeks the highest ground. If I've got a bump out in my pasture, I've always noticed that if I got a bump in my pasture somewhere, maybe it's 10 feet higher than everything else, man, the cows are always hanging out there, right? If I lose a set of cows, I jump on my horse. We had 12 cows get out the other day, but they went out my property and then they went over to the backside of my neighbor's property. And then he thought they belonged to someone else. So he just flipped the fence open and put them out on that range. Well, that range is like 50,000 acres. And so my cows just trotted off and I couldn't find them and I don't have a helicopter. And so I jumped on a horse early in the morning, took a little water bottle and brought my dog. And man, I was out there all afternoon looking for cows. I finally found them. Well, one of the things I do is I don't look for low ground, right? Cows don't like to hang out in an area where there'd be, defilade fire, right?
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
By nature, they go to the high ground. Why? Well, because they can sit up there and look around and see when the predators are coming. So they can see, there's a wolf pack. There's no wolves out here that are chasing cows, but they'll go, there's some wolves out there about 2 miles. We better move. So they like high ground. Well, what do they do when they're up there? Well, they don't go up there to eat. You eat in the low ground. They eat along the creeks, and then they traverse up to the high ground to wait. And one of the things they do when they wait is they ruminate. So they spit up their cud and chew, and one's standing up watching while the rest of the herd is, sitting around. We've all seen them move their mouths and spit up their cud and chew, and then they stand up, stretch, and poop and pee. Well, guess what just happened? This is really interesting. That poop and that pee, that fertilizer, that's the first and only time in all of nature that nutrients move reverse gravity. They go the opposite direction of gravity. All nutrients in nature start at the hilltop and through erosion and wind and rain work their way down to the valleys and to the draws and to the creek beds. But when a cow eats in a creek bed and goes up to wait for and watch for predators and poop on the top of a hill, that's the only time that nutrients will go opposite direction of gravity in all of history, in all of nature, anywhere.
Yeah. So you're the crazy libertarian, tree hugging cowboy that your neighbors think are completely insane. Have they? Are they kind of starting to come around to it? Did they get it now? Yeah, exactly. But so you're that's what I appreciate so much is that you're actually showing that it can be done, and it's just by virtue of doing that. Those people who are saying that cow farts are bad for the environment and all this nonsense, they just look completely silly when you expose a guy like you who's actually doing it and how you're doing it and for the reasons that you're doing it. And so that's what I love about this. People should buy Sunrise Ranch beef. So, well, listen, let me finish off by saying if you're in the military, police departments, fire departments, or first responders, if that's you out there, thank you very much for your service. Stay safe. Doug Lindemood, great talking to you, brother.
Thanks for watching RAINMAN'S Take, Observations on the World We Live In. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow RAINMAN'S Take on Instagram at RAINMAN'S Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.